Welcome to the revolution. So before I begin, I'd like to take a little survey I do with some of the students that I work with. I'd like you to raise your hands if you think you'll have the opportunity to go into space in 60 years. Go ahead and keep your hands up. Those of you with your hands down now, you need to read more science fiction. So go ahead and keep your hands up if you think you'll have the opportunity to visit or travel into space in 30 years. It may be a pilgrimage to Mars or a trip to lower Earth orbit, going to space in 30 years. Not too bad. How about 20 years? How optimistic is my audience tonight? All right, not too bad. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about an industry that I'm very excited about. It's an industry I've been working in for about 10 years now. I did my first internship at the NASA Ames Research Center in 2008, and since that time, I've realized that most people don't know very much about the space industry, which is one of the reasons why I created my company, Intergalactic Education. I want to show people that we have a future living in space. And so to do that, my team of developers and I have created a STEM-focused educational product called Space World. Last year, we started working with our first school district in Maryland, and more recently with some schools down in Florida and in Texas. And if you're an educator or a space company and you like what you hear tonight, be sure to check us out at spaceworld.us. I'm looking at you, Elon. So every once in a while, I get the chance to go out and watch the students use Space World in the classroom. And I do that little survey that I had you guys do at the beginning. And it's sad. A lot of the kids these days, they don't think they're going to have the opportunity to go into space. 50 years ago, NASA put the first man on the moon and inspired an entire generation of kids into thinking that they'd be able to go into space. Now, unfortunately, that bar was too high. For all practical purposes, the Apollo program was 2 decades ahead of its time. We didn't have 3D printers. We didn't have GPS. We didn't have the World Wide Web. And so I'm going to try and inspire you with a speech that came out in 1961. I've condensed this speech and I've altered it slightly. And seeing as how we're in Boston, I'm going to do my best to give you a New Englander accent. And so here it goes. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to put the first woman on the moon by the end of this decade and do the other things too. Not because they're easy, but because they're hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that goal is one we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one in which we intend to make affordable for all mankind. For we meet in an hour of great change and challenge, in a decade of hope and fear, in an age of both knowledge and ignorance. Despite the striking fact that our scientific manpower is doubling every 4 years, despite the striking fact that the most of the scientists the world has ever known are alive and working today, no man can fully grasp how far and how fast we have come. Surely, the opening frontier of space promises both high cost and hardship, as well as high reward. So I'm delighted to be here today, and I'm particularly delighted to be here for this TED Talk, because we meet in a university noted for knowledge, in a state noted for progress, and a country noted for capitalism, and we stand in need of all three. Those who came before us made certain that this society rode the first waves of rocketry during the 1960s, and my generation does not intend to founder in the backwash of the coming age of space. We mean to be a part of it, and we mean to lead it. We've sworn that we shall not see space filled with weapons of mass destruction, but by instruments of knowledge and understanding, and most importantly, entertainment and manufacturing. Yet the prophecies of this great nation of the United States of America cannot be fulfilled by being first, but by being the best, the largest, and the most efficient. In short, our leadership in science and industry, our obligations to ourselves as well as others, require us to make these efforts, to solve these mysteries for the good of all mankind and to become the world's market leader in space. The growth of our industry will lead to new knowledge of mapping and observations, to new tools, medicines, and materials that we're unable to manufacture here on Earth. I believe $1 trillion industry will come out of thin air, very thin air. And so what is space good for? Space is good for a lot of things, actually. It's good for urban planning. It's good for agricultural planning. We can use it during disaster management efforts. It's very useful after a natural disaster. We can use it for illegal whale tracking and illegal deforestation tracking. But not only that, it amazes me how some people take for granted how the cell phone in your pocket guides you to where you're going. It gives you the weather. It allows you to watch direct television. It allows you to communicate with your family and friends over large distances. All of these capabilities are because of space. And that's why the satellite services industry is a $335 billion industry. Now, $335 billion, that sounds like a lot, and it is. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, folks. Tonight, I'm going to talk to you about an emerging economy that within 2 decades is going to be worth $1 trillion. So the asteroid that you see up on the screen here is worth an estimated $4.8 trillion in platinum group metals like titanium and palladium. There are companies right now and governments that are out. They have space telescopes that are prospecting these types of celestial objects. And I should also note that these objects are quite dangerous. Just ask our friends the dinosaurs. Oh wait, you can't. The asteroid won that one. But before we go out and start mining these asteroids, 2 things need to happen. First, we need the right robots to go out and excavate these rocks. And secondly, we need cheaper rockets. And in order to do that, we need to start thinking about reusability. And not space shuttle era, throw away the main booster and have to replace hundreds of expensive heat shield tiles type of reusable, but actual turn around and launch the rocket next week type of reusability. And luckily, we are. So the rocket you see on your screen here, this rocket has carried out not 1, but 2 missions into space, which is a big deal. A lot of people think that the fuel is expensive. It's not. It costs maybe $150,000, which when you compare that to the cost of the actual rocket, which is typically about $100 million, it's nothing. You pay more in taxes. But if we can start launching these rockets dozens of times, it's going to take the price of that rocket down to single millions of dollars and lower, and in the future, much lower. Which brings me to my next market segment, space tourism. So there are several companies right now that have hundreds of paying passengers that they're going to send into space before the end of the decade. All of the vehicles you see on the screen now have flown experimental payloads to the edge of space. This one down here in the lower left-hand corner, that's attached to the International Space Station. NASA and Bigelow Aerospace have a partnership agreement to start testing that module over the next couple of years. What else is space good for? Space is good for a lot of things. It provides an environment that's unlike anything here on Earth. Proteins fold in very different ways because there's no convection. I believe a renaissance in manufacturing is going to happen that's equivalent to the importance of the original Industrial Revolution. Nanostructures, which normally break in a regular Earth environment, can be stretched to very extreme lengths in a microgravity environment. We're going to find new chemicals. We're going to find new drugs. We're going to find new plants. We've already found seeds that, when taken up to the International Space Station and germinated, unlock new genes that have been dormant for millions of years. We can then take those seeds, bring them back down to Earth, plant them in the middle of the desert, and miraculously, they produce berries that contain high-octane jet fuel, which is pretty cool. There's other less interesting things that would be built around space as well, the insurance companies, the advertisers, the lawyers. But what I want to talk about is the things that get me excited. Using lunar regolith and producing oxygen. We need to clean up all of the dust that's on the moon, and we can produce bricks that are made of iron for real estate. Things like entertainment and sports. Can you imagine turning on your television, watching a game of football on the moon where the players can take one another and throw them 10 or 15 feet into the air? That is something that people will pay for. If you look at all of the things on Earth, they're in near infinite supply in space. And that's what we're trying to teach at Intergalactic Education. We've built a platform that gets kids excited about STEM education. We need to show them why science and math are important, because they can grow up and they can work in the technology field that utilizes those skills. We're inspiring the next generation of space leaders. And so as I close out today, I'd like to use one more snippet from the man that took us to the moon. And so, many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked, why did he want to climb it? He said, because it is there. Well, space is there, and we're going to climb it. And new opportunities for peace are there. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on this greatest adventure on which mankind has ever embarked. Thank you.